Increasingly, you will find me armed because there are gangs prowling the streets of America that are committing violence all over the place, looting, burning, tearing down statues, killing people. It's dangerous out there these days, and so it's no surprise that more and more Americans are arming themselves to protect their own lives and their loved ones and their property. But I guess you're not allowed to do that anymore. Not in America. You're actually supposed to just let violent gangs run roughshod over your property and threaten your life. That's what the mainstream media has been telling us. Joining us now to discuss not just the broad topic, but what happened to him personally, is that lawyer from St. Louis that we saw standing with his wife outside of their home with their firearms, protecting their lives and property, Mark McCloskey, personal injury attorney in St. Louis, who had the audacity, the gall, to defend his home. Mr. McCloskey, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So, Mr. McCloskey, we all saw what happened the first time. This gang of very, very peaceful protesters, we are told, breaks some of your property, comes on, threatens you. They go on by. You defend yourself. The update since then is that the protesters, the rioters, came back.
That's true. We had gotten a tip from somebody I can't disclose that not only were they coming back, but they were coming back specifically to, quote, get us, unquote, and to burn down the house. And it was even advertised on the website for the entity that was operating this protest, something called Expect Us, that they were going to do a return to our house last Friday night.
And this is not just some idle threat, because we've seen that these rioters have been burning down many buildings all around the country and harming people and killing people and doing all sorts of terrible things. So you had to take this threat seriously. And yet, in this bizarro world that we're living in, you have been excoriated by the mainstream institutions, by politicians, by the media, simply for defending yourself.
That's true. And, I want to set the record straight on one thing. I've been reading a lot of reports about me on the media, some of whom have accused me of being a Democrat, and I have donated money to various candidates, particularly ones that were personal friends of mine over the year, but I've been a lifelong Republican. Another thing I'd like to clear up is that the media reports me as being a supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, and I am certainly not. Black Lives Matter, to my understanding, is a Marxist organization opposed to everything I stand for and everything I hold near and dear. I do stand for equal justice for all under the law, but that's got nothing to do with this terrorist organization known as Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely right. And I'm actually somewhat surprised to hear you say that. I should have learned my lesson by now, but I believed the media when they said that you were a Democrat and when they said that you supported BLM. But there's this issue in the country right now, which is Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with Black Lives Mattering. The Black Lives Matter organization, the leaders have described themselves as Marxists explicitly. They've called for the destruction of the nuclear family. They've called for overturning the whole system. So that's very different. So I don't know what's worse, Mark, to be smeared as a bigot or to be smeared as a Democrat. Frankly, these days, maybe there might not be such a difference.
Well, if you don't like what somebody says today, all you have to do is say they're a racist.
That's right. That's right. What sort of pushback have you gotten? Obviously, we know what the mainstream press has given to you. Has there been any reaction in your own community or from local officials as well to punish you for having the gall to defend yourself?
Well, let me paint the picture a little bit about what happened last Friday. By Thursday afternoon, we had started to, when we got the tip and we realized that this was a very credible threat, we started trying to hire private security. Local secondary duty officers weren't interested in doing it. We got in touch with some special forces type contractors who provide security all over the planet, but they didn't want the bad press. Finally, by Thursday afternoon at about 3 o'clock, we had been told by the last group, these were some special forces guys, just walk away from your house, abandon it. And I said, I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah.
And my wife was just beside herself. So without dropping any names, I called up another Fox host who put the word out. My lawyer finally got a hold of a entity out of Texas that brought up some serious firepower. Local secondary employment police from outside the St. Louis area made themselves available. By Friday night, we had cooperation from the top of the government on down. The local police encouraged that we were supporting them as well, stood up like champs. I had Chief John Hayden in front of the House for most of the night. And for an example of how policing can actually work effectively, the chief got together, and he had his lieutenant, who is in charge of civil disobedience, or whatever the euphemism they use these days, came out, met with my private security guys, told them how they thought it would work best to have a show of force but not of weapons. Our guys did exactly what the chief wanted. The chief stayed there and mediated the entire thing. The crowd was loud. They were angry, but they weren't permitted to do anything destructive or violent, and they moved on.
Well, I guess this is the main issue here, because I was so shocked when people attacked you and your wife, and even some moderates and conservatives did, and they said you don't have a right to defend yourself, at the same time that they're calling to defund the police. So if you don't have the police and you're not allowed to defend yourself, then I guess the only alternative is to, as you say, let the mob come and burn your house down, as they've done in many other places.
And here in St. Louis, I mean, the last riot, we're not allowed to use that word, peaceful protest.
Right, peaceful riot.
Before this one, on June the 2nd, they burned downtown. And as I said before, I watched on live television a 7-Eleven downtown, bricks through the window, people looting it, then setting the fire, then the fire totally engulfing the business. I'm watching this live from a helicopter feed for 40 minutes, and no one ever shows up. No police, no fire, no nothing. I look over at my wife and I say, we're here all alone. If this happens to us, we're all alone. We can't depend on anybody else.
Yep.
That first night, that June 28th, that's exactly the way it was. This group came up the street screaming and chanting, and they come up parallel to our gate. And we look around, there's no security. Our private security, our neighborhood's got, a couple of private guards. They're not present. No St. Louis City police present. And then the gates burst open and they come right at us. I mean, it was pretty, pardon the expression, stinking frightening.
Of course it would be. I mean, how could it not be? And I think one thing that's been a little unclear in all of this is the media are trying to play down the effect of the protesters on your property. They're saying, oh, no, they were keeping off the property. They weren't damaging any property at all. This was a huge overreaction. But they did damage property. Is that correct?
They did. And, despite the fact that I took pictures of that gate, I looked at the metadata on my cell phone. I took the pictures of the broken gate at 7:42 p.m. that night. As recently as I can't remember, I've been up for a long time, but in one of the interviews, I think it was on Breakfast Britain, the commentator says, well, we don't know when those pictures were taken, do we, on the pretense that the pictures were faked or something. And I said, yes, I do. I took them myself, and they were taken 5 minutes after the crowd moved on.
Of course. And what do you think the effect of this is on the election? And what do you think the election, how do you think the election is affecting all of this? Because it seems to me that there is a political overtone to everything here. I can't tell which side it would possibly be helping, but it does seem to me, even though every year we hear this is the most important election in our lifetimes, and it's the most important election in our lifetimes, when one side of this country is actually encouraging rioters and roving mobs to go attack people, break their property, and threaten their lives, when the country is actually burning down, that might make it the most important election of our lifetimes.
Well, let me say this. I heard the president's speech at Mount Rushmore where he talks about fighting against leftist extremists and Marxists. And then the mainstream media says he's being divisive. I'm 63 years old, but I never thought I would live long enough to hear the media in this country say that fighting against communism is divisive, that we should live in harmony with the communists within our own country and just let them do what they want.
Right.
That was such a shock to me. I think the answer to your question is, I think there are elements in our country, probably represented by most of the mainstream media, that wants this to accelerate to a point where there has to be a confrontation, not between civil authorities, but between individuals and the mob, have a Kent State type situation, and then blame it all on Trump.
Yeah, right. I think we know that this is organized at a pretty sophisticated level. We know that this is being pushed by serious institutions of power. And so it would seem to me that there is a political strategy here as well. But I want to get back to something you said earlier, which is there's this truly defamatory line out there that you're a lifelong Democrat, and you said, no, I'm a lifelong Republican, but I've given a little money if friends of mine are running for office as Democrats. And this reminds me of a period in America that I think might be gone, which is you could be a Republican and you could have Democratic friends, and maybe if one of them runs for a local office, maybe you give a little money to them as well. But it wasn't like this complete total polarization where the left says, if you don't disagree with us on everything, we're going to burn your house down. Do you think that period of American life is over? I mean, are we sort of just hopelessly polarized at this point going into the future?
I hope not, but it's very discouraging. I mean, there'll be people that I basically put people running for office into two categories. One are people that I think genuinely care for the people and for the country and will do their job honorably regardless of what their party affiliation is. And then there's people that just want power and control and don't care how they acquire it. And when I've donated to people of both parties, I've tried to limit my money exclusively to those people who I believe genuinely have the best interests of our civilization, our nation, and everything that our forefathers worked for the last 244 years at heart, and not just their own egos or the enhancement of power.
Right. Are you and your wife afraid of the mob coming back yet again? I mean, is this over? Has this finished, or do you think that you'll continue to be attacked either by the mob or by the civil authority?
We have not heard whether or not either one of us is going to be indicted yet, although that's still out there. But I'm sitting in my office building, which is 3 blocks from my house. I'm looking at plywood out the window.
Yeah.
We're still boarded up. The front of the house is still boarded up. And is that a reasonable precaution, or is that being a little paranoid? I don't know, but I know for one thing for sure, I don't want to be burned. I don't want to be killed for this.
Yep, that's right. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say you and your wife have become an inspiration. I know that the media were raking you over the coals, but a lot of us are out there who were looking in that and saying, yes, finally, somebody is pushing back. They're not going to allow self-proclaimed Marxists to run roughshod, not just over property and over innocent lives, but over our country itself. I was joking that I want Brooks Brothers to make that image of you with the rifle to be the cover of their next catalog. I don't know if they're going to take me up on that opportunity, but I really appreciate.
I would not hold my breath.
Unfortunately, it's too bad. But I appreciate you taking the time with us and for clearing up the record, on your political views, on your alleged support of Black Lives Matter, which turns out, like so much in the media, to be a lie. I appreciate you correcting the record. I'm sure now they're going to go and lie about you a lot more. So I suppose then we will have to have you back on to clear up the record again. But from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for standing up for that symbol. And I also wish you and your wife the best of luck moving forward.
I sure appreciate it. And thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Mark. Mark McCloskey, they really stood firm at a time when a lot of people in this country are not. Even people who should know better, even people who understand what Marxism is, understand what radicalism is, don't want to see Washington statues be pulled down. A lot of people are trying to stay on the sidelines, and that's not a good idea. What have we learned about appeasement? Well, you feed the crocodile. Hopefully the crocodile eats you last. Appeasement does not work, folks. One has to pick a side. This video is sponsored by BlinkSale, the revolutionary invoicing software for contractors and small businesses. Spend less time billing and more time making bank with BlinkSale. Get a free trial at the link in the video description.